Welcome to the Korea Society's Arts and Culture program. I'm Jayo, Senior Director of Arts and Culture. If you're in Washington, D.C. this winter, I hope you'll go see Korean Treasures, Collected, Cherished, Shared at the National Museum of Asian Art. It is the first U.S. exhibition of significant works from the renowned Lee Kun-Hee Collection, and it features over 200 works, including a dozen national treasures designated by the Korean government. The largest and the most comprehensive presentation of Korean art ever mounted at the National Museum of Asian Art, the exhibition spans 1,500 years, from ancient Buddhist sculptures and ceramics to paintings, furnishings, and 20th century art. We are delighted to have three curators from the National Museum of Asian Art to talk about this exhibition. Carol He, J. Keith Wilson, and Sunwoo Hwang are joining us from Washington, D.C. To our viewers, please submit any questions you may have about this exhibition by emailing artsandculture@koreasociety.org. Carol, Keith, and Sunwoo, thank you very much for sharing your time with our audience this evening, and welcome to the Korea Society. For those who may not know, what is the Lee Kun-Hee Collection?
Maybe I can start with the question. Lee Kun-Hee Collection refers to the landmark gift made to the Korean nation back in 2021 by the family of Lee Kun-Hee, the former chairman of Samsung Group. The number of artworks donated to the nation numbered 23,000, over 21,000 to the National Museum of Korea, and nearly 1,500 to the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art. And about 100 objects were also donated to the regional museums in Korea, and it is considered one of the most significant cultural donations in Korea's modern history.
So Lee Kun-Hee Collection includes more than 23,000 works. I think I have the number right. What do we know about how Lee Kun-Hee's collecting began and how it evolved over the years?
So, although the collection is named in honor of Lee Kun-Hee, the late former chairman, the collection itself began from his father, Lee Byung-chul, the founder of Samsung Group, back in the 1940s when he started his business in Daegu, Korea. And his son, Lee Kun-hee, continued his legacy and continued to collect Korean art along with his wife, Hong La-hee. And their interest was very vast. They did not focus on a particular field of Korean art, but they collected in all areas, not just traditional, but also contemporary. And some of their collection also includes Western painting as well.
So when there are so many different types of objects in this collection, do you see any sort of an overarching themes or philosophies in this family's collection?
Although it's not necessarily easy to attribute certain acquisitions to certain family members, we get a sense that for Lee Byung-chul, the focus may have been in part a goal of repatriating national treasures that had gone abroad. In particular, he was very proud of repatriating the first Koryo Buddhist paintings. As many of your viewers will know, there's a fairly finite group of these rare paintings that survive worldwide, somewhere around 160, 165. Up until the 1980s, none of them had been preserved in Korea. They had all gone abroad. So I think Lee Byung-chul was very proud in repatriating the first Koryo Buddhist paintings, and we know that those were very proud acquisitions for him, as was one of his favorite objects in the collection, which is on view in our exhibition in Washington. And that is a very special double gourd shaped Celadon ewer with underglazed red painted decoration. This too had left Korea, and he acquired it, I believe, in Japan and repatriated it. We happen to have the only other intact example in our collection in the Freer. Our example was also acquired in Japan by Charles Lang Freer, our founder, back in 1915. For Lee Kun-Hee himself and his wife, I think they had particular interests that they may have had separately. We've learned that white porcelain may have been a special interest of Lee Kun-Hee, whereas for his wife, Hong Na-hee, we've learned that she was particularly fond of traditional Korean furniture. I myself also love traditional Korean furniture, both the type of works that were owned by the Yangban scholar gentry as well as court pieces. And I think she was particularly fond too of modern and contemporary works. So even though it's, as Sunwoo said, even though it bears the name Lee Kun-hee, it really represents, I think, a diversity of collecting interests.
Was there anything that surprised you about the collection? Something you didn't expect to see that was in the collection?
I don't know that I was especially surprised, but I was certainly excited about the prospect of being able to select from such a wide range of works. Um, there were, or there are, nearly 300 different artists that were represented in the collection that was gifted to the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art. So the works range from paintings to a couple of stellar works that I was pleased to include by Bang Ne-hyun, for example, in the exhibition. But also there is photography, there are video works. So the really the breadth and the range, and as Keith says, the diversity of media and time periods covered in a single collection is an aspect that really excited me about the Lee Kun-Hee collection.
There were a pair of paintings that I found especially gratifying, exciting, and in fact, they appeared in one of the slides earlier on in the slides that we were cycling through. It was a pair of portraits depicting the same sitter. There was a preparatory painting that was done showing the sitter in a very informal, very kind of generally rendered plain garment, and then a finished version of that same portrait where he's shown in a formal court um, robe with a rank badge. It's extremely rare to find. Here we go. It's extremely rare to find both a preparatory painting and a finished work showing the same figure, and to be able to see the two, and we're showing them side by side in the exhibition. That was a real treat for me.
I think for myself, I was very surprised to learn that the largest portion of the Lee Kun-hee collection for the traditional works uh, is accounted by the rare books, not the artworks. So I didn't know until I started on this project that the Lee Kun-hee had a dedicated effort to preserve the knowledge of the Korean ancestors and keep and preserve this Korean cultural heritage by collecting books.
So you can, I think, just listening to you, we can see just the diversity within this large collection. How does the Lee family's donation fit into the larger picture of art philanthropy in Korea? What makes their approach unique or groundbreaking, or are they the only ones? Like, where are they in terms of the whole picture of art philanthropy in Korea?
But there were major private collections that were formed earlier in the 19th century. I think of the Kanson collection in particular, that was formed in the earlier decades, the first half of the 20th century. Um, the Lee collection, I think, represents really the most active, the strongest private collecting of the second half of the 20th century and beyond. And what I find particularly interesting about the collection from that point of view is this is precisely the same time period where art historians, museum curators, art specialists, critics were trying to define what might be termed the Korean art canon. What is Korean art history? So just as that kind of dialogue was going on in academic circles, the Lee family was, in a sense, actively participating in that effort by collecting in the areas that they chose to concentrate on. The collection is particularly rich in material from the Chosun period. And as a result, our exhibition is particularly strong in Chosun period examples across media. And I think it's quite clear, from my point of view at least, the degree to which the Lee collection has influenced our understanding of what constitutes the Chosun period, what represents the aesthetics of the Chosun period across social classes, from the Yangban to the court, even to common people. So it's this very interesting reflection of collecting at a time when the entire notion of Korean art history was also coming into formation.
I think that also that so many works became part of important national collections, public collections that were immediately made available. Research was done on them. The substantial catalogs or digital resources were produced by our colleagues in Korea. And they were very generous with their knowledge and all of their research. So this, in effect, is the best part of philanthropy, this kind of philanthropy, in that it expands possibilities for education, research, and, as Keith says, really getting a better understanding of what Korean art history is.
I think this donation really had a positive impact on Korea and Korean art exhibitions. I think the name value of Lee Kun-Hee in Korea really drew a curiosity of a lot of visitors and attracted and engaged visitors who normally don't go to art museums. So I think this is a positive effect that came out of this landmark gift.
Yeah,
Then
one concluding comment I might add is the degree to which collecting both traditional and modern and contemporary works by one collecting family has, I think, influenced collecting trends more broadly in Korea, where we find other collectors not specializing in one or the other, contemporary or traditional, but trying to bridge that gap. If you look at most American collectors, usually they choose one area that they're going to specialize in and go quite deep. But I think one influence of the breadth of the Lee collection has been to influence other Korean collectors to go broad as well.
that's very interesting. And Keith, what you mentioned also before about how they were collecting these pieces while the canon of Korean art history was also being founded, it's a really interesting question. So, what do you think is the story of Korean art told through this particular collection?
Well, for me, I think the strongest contribution, in part because it's what we concentrated on in preparing our exhibition, I became much more familiar with the Chosen material and the degree to which the collection has strongly influenced what we consider to be art of the Chosun period masterworks, as well as kind of general themes and important areas. Um, I like the fact that we were able to tell a variety of stories from the collection. One focusing on the aesthetic of the Yangban class, the scholar gentries, but not to exclude the court or Buddhist art at the same time. The collection really reflects broadly activities in the Yangban home as well as the court and Buddhist temples. And as a result, we're able to share those stories, that is the range of aesthetics with our museum visitors.
Mm. Great. Then, how was the decision to send this collection of this magnitude on an international tour made, and what led to the involvement of the National Museum of Asian Art?
Do you want to take that one, Sunu? Do you remember we were with our director, Chase Robinson, on his first official visit to Korea as director of our museum? We were having lunch with the Director General of the National Museum of Korea, and this was 2022. So a year after the announcement of the Lee Kun-Hee gift had been made. And Sunwoo and I said to our director, ask them if we can help organize an international tour of the Lee collection that we may be able to co-organize. And at about that time, we also learned that the Art Institute of Chicago was also interested in organizing a similar kind of US presentation. So ultimately, pretty quickly on, we partnered with the Art Institute of Chicago, with our co-organizers, the National Museum of Korea, of course, and Museum of Modern Contemporary Art Korea, the four of us working together to frame this project. I think none of us had worked on an exhibition that had so many co-organizers. It's rare that you have four institutions involved in one show. But it did allow us to move relatively quickly. So the first conversations occurred in 2022. Here we are in 2025. Normally, for our museum, an exhibition takes anywhere from 4 to sometimes even 6 years to generate. So this was a pretty short developmental track. And I think that's a testament to the fact that the four institutions and we as colleagues were able to work very effectively together to pull this off.
Just to add a little bit to Keith's point, before we started on the project back in 2022, we had partnered with the National Museum of Korea and organized small spotlight exhibitions back in 2019 and again in 2022. And I think we've developed a strong partnership so that built trust has enabled us to move quickly and effectively in planning and co-organizing these exhibitions with our partners. And of course, over the course of the 3 years, we've made a visit at least once a year. So I think we've made 3 or 4 visits to Korea to plan the exhibition, which was very fun
Yeah.
and exciting.
And of course, National Museum of Asian Art, part of the National Museum of Asian Art, I should say, is Freer Gallery, which is known to be, one of the first, I believe it is the very first institution in the United States to have a Korean collection, Korean art collection. So how does this exhibition align with the National Museum of Asian Art's mission?
I'm not sure if we are the very first to have the Korean gallery in the United States, but I can say that Korean artworks were on display on the day the museum door opened back in 1923. And ever since then, we've been trying to do research, preserve, and also present Asian art and Korean art at the museum. And this Korean art treasures exhibition aligns with our museum's mission in that uh, we've tried to offer a comprehensive view of Korean art. Our collection is strong in Goryeo ceramics, and we're also proud to have 3 Goryeo Buddhist paintings in our collection. But our permanent collection was rather limited to what we have. But this Korean Treasures exhibition was a great opportunity to offer a comprehensive presentation of Korean art to our visitors.
It's also part of our mission to ensure that our viewers understand the role of tradition in history, even in the present. So we have a contemporary art program, a modern and contemporary art program. So to be able to, again, show that range of Korean art and have this opportunity to include so many important paintings from the 20th century is very much a part of our mission to look from the past to the present.
Yeah, and one thing we experimented with in this show was showing contemporary alongside traditional art in the same gallery. So for those of your visitors who have a chance to see the show, they'll see that contemporary pieces, 20th century works, appear throughout the exhibition, as well as in a dedicated gallery near the end of the series. So trying to make that bridge, as Carol says, between, well, not bridge, but really help our visitors see the connection between traditions and contemporary, especially with the importance of, K-pop and everything else, which is really ruling the world now. Making sure that our visitors understand the roots of some of that contemporary creativity.
I think there was my favorite piece. I have to say, my favorite piece at the exhibition, that beautiful red of it was Kimongi, right? It was just absolutely beautiful. Then what was the process like bringing this exhibition to DC? What were the key steps that had to be made to make it possible for a Korean collection of this scale to be presented at a major American institution?
Well, I'll pick up on something that Sunwoo just mentioned a few minutes ago. The best part really was being there and being with the works in storage and talking to our curatorial colleagues there to think about the best way to lay out a narrative, what works that we'd want to bring, and how we would want to display them in space. There are many steps, but that's one that stands out, I think, for all 3 of us.
And speaking of which, this exhibition will travel to Chicago and London, but I believe that each hosting institution, the National Museum of Asian Art, Chicago Institute of Art, and British Museum, got to select pieces for its own exhibition. So what guided your choices?
Yeah, I was going to mention that working on the checklist was not easy. As many of your viewers will know, light-sensitive works, that's chiefly paintings in ink and color on paper and silk, usually have display restrictions. Often museums will restrict their display to 6 months out of a 5 or 7 year period. So from the outset, we knew that paintings in general would not be able to be shown at more than one venue. So we knew that the checklists for us, Chicago, London, would be different for that reason. Then, of course, our director was very ambitious for us. He said that he wanted it to be a major show, our largest presentation of Korean art ever, and our most important exhibition for the decade. So that encouraged us to really think ambitiously about not only the scale in terms of number of objects in the exhibition, but also the size of objects included in our presentation. So right now you're looking at a drum stand, uh, which you can see is assembled from a number of different chunks of wood. You can see those butterfly joins in the two legs that are facing us. Similarly, the legs on the other side are made out of two pieces of wood that have been joined together. The tail is a separate piece. The lotus-shaped saddle on the back of the lion is a separate piece. We were really captivated by this object, but learned that it weighed over 500 pounds. And so we were a little bit concerned about pieces like this. We also borrowed a large Choreo bell that I think was in the slide set earlier, also weighing over 500 pounds. In the old days, objects like this would have been shipped literally by boat. But in the modern day, these are objects that are sent to us by airplane. So, 500, 600-pound objects are very difficult and costly to transport, but we decided to be ambitious and include pieces like this in our show. So these two pieces in particular are only being shown in Washington. I believe they're not going to be shown in Chicago or London. So our checklist is special both in the things that are light sensitive, but also in these really amazing objects that are very rarely shown to American audiences simply because of the complexity of getting them here.
And
Yeah. Go
sorry.
ahead, Carol.
I was just going to say it might be helpful to note for those that might be able to come and see the exhibition, but at the outset, the idea was not to organize a chronological exhibition, but an exhibition that would draw visitors through each gallery unified by an idea or a theme. So that also shaped the selection somewhat as well.
And I do want to go back to that point a little later about the theme of the or the different themes within this exhibition. But I was also really struck by how you began the exhibition with a checkado, but then you end with checkado. So for those people who are watching who may not know what checkado is, can you tell us what checkado is and why did you make that choice to begin and end with checkado?
Checkado is a screen painting depicting rare books and treasured objects arranged in a bookcase. It started from the court and later enjoyed by the educated class, and the painting became popular to broader society in the late Joseon dynasty. It depicts objects that the late people of the late Joseon period desire to possess and collect. And here you can see many imported goods from China, such as colorful ceramics, bronze vessels, and scholarly objects like brushes, seals, brush holders, and inkstones. And this checkado screen really gives you a sense of looking into a scholar study or a collector study. So we thought this beautiful screen would make a nice introduction to the history of collecting in Korea and also the Lee Kun-Hee Collection, which is also composed of wide variety of objects.
And then you sort of created your own checkado at the end. If we can go to that slide of this. Yep.
Yep.
Yes, in the final gallery, this is the lobby, and
Yeah.
in the final gallery, we designed a case inspired by checkado. We wanted to bookend this gallery by the theme of collecting because this particular exhibition draws from a single collection. And here in the final gallery, we wanted to emphasize the breadth and depth of Lee Kun-Hee Collection again, and their collecting philosophy. So these objects represent not only their commitment to preserving Korean cultural heritage, but it also represents the time and effort they put into in forming this collection.
And you mentioned how this exhibition is not necessarily arranged in chronological order, but there are like themes that goes into each room. So can you tell us a little bit about how the exhibition is organized?
Yeah, I mean the old school for exhibition organization may be to tell a chronological story. So you begin in remote antiquity and you pass through time until you get to the 20th century or 21st century. Other approaches might be based on mediums. So you have a gallery of painting, you have a gallery of ceramics, you have a gallery of sculpture. Um, for this exhibition, we knew, there it is. That's the chaekgeori that Sunwoo was talking about. For this exhibition from the start, we knew that we did not want to follow those traditional models, that we wanted to mix media, we wanted to mix chronological time periods, we wanted to mix modern and pre-modern. To tell thematic stories. And we ended up landing on the notion of several contexts in which art was made to be used. So, especially in the Chosun period. So clearly, one of those locations was in the home of the Yangban. So concentrating on those things that reflected the life and aesthetics, the interests and media, the objects that were important for the scholar gentry class that really helped define one strand of not only Chosun aesthetics, but I would say even modern Korean aesthetics. So the first couple of galleries in the exhibition really focus on the scholar officials and the kinds of objects that they chose to surround themselves with. That's followed by a couple of galleries dedicated to the court and looking at those institutions that were created by the court to supply court needs. The court painting bureau, the royal kilns, and the various other art producing agencies, furniture making, that were responsible for responding to the needs of the court.
And
And
I
then,
think, sorry, Keith, to interrupt you, but
go
I
ahead.
think we have some images that we can show. Can we go to the next slides of yep, there we go. So these are the rooms that you talked about of the Joseon area, Joseon Dynasty and other parts of the collection. So Keith,
Right.
would you like to
And
continue?
sure, I was just going to mention the third area that we focused on, the third context that we focused on, and the broadest in the entire exhibition is really the the Buddhist temple as a nexus. Perfect timing. The Buddhist temple as a nexus for art making, and this begins in the Three Kingdoms period, as you can see in this slide on the left hand. Quarter, a small group of very important all national treasures or treasures, gilt bronze Buddhist sculptures that were created in the Three Kingdoms and Unified Shilla period. And this gallery runs from those early origins all the way through to the early 20th century. So really trying to illustrate the breadth and depth of Buddhist art in Korea from the beginning until today, since it is such an important strand in defining Korean creativity. And here again, you can see a mixture of media. There's sculpture, there's metalwork, there's painting, there's calligraphy, and this gallery, like others, includes contemporary works as well. then finally, after these galleries that really focus on these interior spaces, whether it's the home of the Yongbon palace halls or Buddhist temples, we move outdoors. And in the next series of galleries, explore Korean interest and depiction of nature, landscapes as well as natural subjects. And then the last major section, subdivision of the show is really carols, where we move into the modern and contemporary sphere, which represents a complete departure from these previous more traditional contexts. I don't know, Carol, if you want to talk about your inspiration in Area 9.
Um, well, the image we're seeing right now is actually at the entrance, but it does link to the penultimate gallery, what we're calling Area 9. It transitions from the landscape views, but takes a different approach and really focuses on works by 10 artists.
There we are.
Uh,
You had it.
yeah, right in there.
There. Good.
By 10 artists. On the one end, you have that wonderful and rare early work by Baek Nam-sun, a woman artist active in the 30s. And then on the facing wall, which is not in view, are the works by Park Ne-hyun that I mentioned before. Those are four of five works by Lee Young-no. The idea, the gallery is titled Transcending Tradition. So I wanted to shift the focus a bit and look at a few examples of artists who were trained in Japan or in Korea's sort of first art academies, really, and had a grounding in more familiar or more traditional forms like ink painting. And then how these artists progressively experimented with, some in very radical ways, but always remain grounded in wanting to understand how these more Korean cultural forms, artistic forms like ink painting, the sensibility of ink and paper and those materials could be how they could innovate with that, how they could translate these techniques and these sensibilities in a modern world. So it's also a story of how early and how cosmopolitan these artists were. Baek Nam-sun, for instance, was exhibiting alongside Fauvists and Neo-Impressionists in Paris in the 30s. Park Ne-hyun was studying printmaking in New York. Lee Young-no, of course, in Paris, and the Kim Won-gi paintings from New York. So they were bringing together this sensibility. In this painting, for instance, the moon jar takes a completely different form and a completely different understanding of movement and of texture. And perhaps an element of surprise, very subtle, is that artists like Kim Won-gi, although working in oil on canvas, we're treating it like ink on paper. You can see in that fine white line the bleeding and the seeping and the variability of tones. So this area was really an opportunity to focus on how artists were searching for perhaps a more universal aesthetic language that brought together what they understood or their training in Korea and Japan and what they were encountering in the wider world of European American art movements.
That's great. So I wanted to give you a question from our audience, if you don't mind. And actually it applies to, I think, sort of the Area 9, sort of the contemporary, I should say the sort of the second half of the 20th century. So the question is, given the complex history of Korea, such as colonial occupation, the Korean War, and rapid modernization, how do you see the evolution of artistic styles and themes reflected in this collection? Are there a particular piece that sort of captures the tension between sort of the tradition and modernity? Just as I think you kind of answered the question too, but
It is a really rich and fascinating story. Difficult to achieve through 15 works, but there are moments. For instance, there is a work by, well, there is a painting from the Shamanism series by Pak Seng-Hwang. Now, he was working in the 80s, and the figure of the shaman for late modern and even contemporary artists plays a particular role within the socio-political context of the 80s to the present. So there are moments to touch on these more complicated stories. There is another example. There is Yi Young-no's one of the paintings from the Crowd series, which was very much, again, influenced by that time period from 1980 forward, where he, in the last phase of his practice, really dedicated himself to these very personal expressions of what was happening, not just in Korea, but worldwide, at the time, global movements, social movements. So it is a complex story, but what I also liked to retain of that is that these were artists that really continued to work and wanted to find a way to, again, retain a certain sense of Korea, of Korean art, while also being very much a part of the world. I think that, again, hard to tell the full and rich story within a selection of 15 works by 10 artists, but I think one of the key works that I was really excited about including, again, was that Pak Seng-Hwang shamanism. There is a reason why he painted or he chose those colors. There's a reason why he returned to using color when he went through a period of more monochrome painting. Right? And that was very much related to his wanting to, again, understand what was distinctly Korean about his practice. So there are a few glimpses here and there, which I hope will encourage people to maybe look further into.
Absolutely. Another question from the viewer is about the collection. Many private collections reflect personal tastes. How much of this collection you think is about, I guess because Keith, you mentioned earlier that this is not just Lee Kun-Hee's collection, it's his father's and his wife's and the whole family seems to have been very interested in it. Was it how much of it is driven by one's taste versus one's sort of mission? You mentioned how Lee Byung-chul wanted to repatriate some of the works that had left Korea. I mean, we probably wouldn't really know, but what do you think is that? Is there tension or is there a balance between one's taste versus one's mission for amassing such a massive collection?
I think first and foremost, they were driven by quality and importance. And it's important to remember that not all of these choices were made by the three family members. They did, as many collectors will, employ specialists to help guide them. Works don't fall from the sky. Objects come up in the most unlikely places all over the world. And so I think it's quite clear that the family was aided in their mission to develop this very important collection that reflects Korean aesthetics and with the best possible examples. With professional assistance, it wasn't completely a family-driven enterprise, and so not because I'm jealous of the opportunities that my professional colleagues had in assisting the Lee family in finding and acquiring these amazing objects, but there is a broader story involved. As I tried to suggest in an earlier answer, I think also the three individuals involved probably were driven by their own kind of private interests. driven by media or period, certain kinds of branches of creativity. And what's I think gratifying is when you put all of that together, the professional assistance as well as the personal choices of the primary collectors, you have such a coherent reflection of a passion for the best representatives of important moments in Korean art history. As I say, in our representation, especially in the Chosun period, but the same could be said for the richness of their choreo collection and the Three Kingdoms and Shilla period before. They even included collections of prehistoric material. So it is very broad in character.
I think every collection is going to have a certain character, a certain sort of subjective, unquantifiable element. But the sheer scale of the collection itself, of course, but also though the expansiveness of the vision of wanting to to preserve such a comprehensive story as much as possible. What is also hopefully a nice touch in the exhibition that will help visitors see that is that we tried to include where we could quotes from each of the three, from both generations of collectors and each of the three principal protagonists in this collection. So again, that expansiveness of vision and a real philosophy of wanting to bring together this that underpins this collection, I think is important to note, I think.
One other thing I might add is institutionally speaking, one reason we were particularly interested in pursuing this project was the idiosyncrasy of private collections. Our own institution, the Freer Gallery of Art, which is really the core of our even our current museum, is based on a private collection of Charles Lang Freer, who lived in the late 19th and early 20th century, died in 1919. We grapple every day with the idiosyncrasies of the collection that he created that very much reflected what he felt was important. So we felt that given that sensitivity to the idiosyncrasies of a private collection as the core of our institutional past, that the opportunity to look at the Lee collection with those same kind of through those same glasses, through those same lenses, and look for the idiosyncrasies, the great strengths, and being able to maximize them in hopefully in our presentation of the collection resonates with our own institutional past.
So I wanted to end with you mentioned very briefly about the K sort of the K culture, the Hallyu and all the popularity of Korean cultural exports, should we say, and that popularity is ever growing and expanding. So what does it mean to you to have this exhibition at this moment?
I think we're very fortunate to have this exhibition at this moment when there is a very high interest in Korean pop culture. This exhibition was not directly inspired by this popular pop culture, but I think we are definitely benefiting from that. I think this exhibition really offers visitors to experience the roots of the K culture that is popular right now. And I hope our visitors to this exhibition can find something that they can connect with.
Great. That's wonderful. Korean treasures collected, cherished, and shared is at the National Museum of Asian Art until February of 2026, and then it will travel to Chicago and then London. I hope everybody will have a chance to enjoy this magnificent exhibition. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us today.